about 6 months ago, Gary and I got a call from a hospital, Mount Sinai in New York, and they said, Rob and Gary, we understand you guys own all the IP around, BHB. And we said, yes. And they said, you probably don't know this, but you guys are saving babies' lives. And we said, can you elaborate? And they said, as we were talking about, they said, these young babies get this MAD disease where they can't metabolize fat or protein and they die. And they said, we're putting them on your BHB and the kids are living. And as we talked to them more and more, we found out when they were putting them on pure D BHB, the kids would not survive. But when they were putting them on DL, the kids would live.
So let's say for the sake of mnemonics, I'm going to say the D isomer, let's call it the drop set isomer, right? Maybe better for performance. The L isomer, let's call it the lengua isomer, maybe better for cognitive performance. I come up with silly ways to keep track of stuff in my head here. But then based on that, how do I know? If I'm grabbing a product off the shelf, does it actually say on the label when you're buying a BHB product, whether it's the D or the L or a mix thereof?
Yes, it does. Yeah, we'll say on the label if it's DL, if it's D, or if it's L. Yeah.
Interesting. And so when you say that, or about the product label, is that products that you guys produce, or like every product has that? Every ketone product with BHB?
Every product will say that. And where this is going is one day there'll be I think what we ship to, there'll be a bottle of D or a canister of D powder. And then there'll be a bottle of L liquid or a canister of L powder. And then depending on what you do, you have your glass of water and you put in a proportion of each, mix it up, and then there you go.
Interesting. So I could theoretically, like if I'm doing like a morning workout, I could say, okay, I'm going to D isomer heavy morning workout, 10, 11 a.m. when I'm really jumping into podcasts, articles, writing, etc. Maybe second dose with the L isomer, something like that.
I do that. Just what you said is what I do every day. I'm up, so I get up early. I'm at the gym by 4. So at 3:30, 3:45, I'm taking a dose of D. And then just like you said, about 12:30, I'm taking a dose of L.
Interesting. What were you saying, Gary?
Here's let me just kind of run down. This is kind of fun. This is the results using a trained AI model in looking at all of the data that we had accumulated during that neurotransmitter study. So we had created a AI model for that, kind of trained it up on BHB, and then we turned it loose on all of the individual effects or all the individual data that we had received in that neurotransmitter study. And these are some preliminary things. I wouldn't say, hey, these are verbatim because they've not been really truly clinically tested. But let me give you kind of a rundown on this discussion because it's kind of fun. But back to your first comment, Ben, you said, hey, what's the deal with physical athletic performance? The AI model came back and said, you know what, if you really want to have peak performance in your athletic performance, use a ratio of 80% R, in the case we're using D, but 80% D, 20% L. And then the next question was, okay, how about cognitive and memory? Use 70% D, 30% L. Mood disorders, 40% D, 60% L. MAD disease, 50% D, 50% L. Weight loss, Rob just mentioned that, 90% D, 10% L. Parkinson's, 30% D, 70% L. ALS, 20% D, 80% L. So what is interesting, and interesting, we asked it, what about heart failure? Came back and said to be determined. So it's fascinating how we've entered a brand new era of ketone therapies, ketone regimens. being able to ratio between D and L gives you different outcomes.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That is By the way, is MAD disease macular degeneration?
No, MAD disease is a disease where the person is unable to assimilate proteins and fats into their system as macronutrients.
Oh, so what's it stand for? Like muscular atrophy, something?
Yeah, it's a disease of digestion where they're not able to break down proteins or break down carbohydrates into energy.
Let's give you a real life story on that. So about 6 months ago, Gary and I got a call from a hospital, Mount Sinai in New York, and they said, Rob and Gary, we understand you guys own all the IP around, BHB. And we said, yes. And they said, you probably don't know this, but you guys are saving babies' lives. And we said, can you elaborate? And they said, as we were talking about, they said, these young babies get this MAD disease where they can't metabolize fat or protein and they die. And they said, we're putting them on your BHB and the kids are living. And as we talked to them more and more, we found out when they were putting them on pure D BHB, the kids would not survive. But when they were putting them on DL, the kids would live. Isn't that interesting?
That is super interesting. Wow.
So then we said, well, how many of these poor kids get this? And they said it's about 5,000 kids in the United States, but they said it's more prolific in Europe and China. And they said, unfortunately, it's going up in the U.S., as all of our health problems in the U.S. are increasing. And then 30 days later, we had hospitals from Michigan and all over calling us with the same problem. So Gary and I created this DL formula and shipped it to them for free. And fortunately, these kids are living because of this.
Wow. Nice job, you guys. That's
thank you.
Incredible.
Hit subscribe, leave a ranking, leave a review if you got a little extra time. It means way more than you might think. Thank you so much.